What follows is not a review or even a proper critical evaluation of Friday the 13th Part 3. Instead, I'll peel back the storytelling mechanics and explain why this stereoscopic film still haunts us. Titles appear, warning theatergoers that the first few minutes of Friday the 13th Part 3 are not presented in 3D. There's good reason for this. The opening is actually an abridged version of Part 2's climax. It's doubtful that anything more was meant than to inform the audience that they wouldn't be seeing anything pop from the screen for a few minutes. But these titles might as well have asked us to view the footage with those cardboard glasses plastered to our faces, because in short order, the film demands that we see the familiar sequence through very different eyes. The recap ends with Ginny and Paul limping from Jason's shack. No return to Ginny's cabin, no muffin, no Jason leaping through the window, no Ginny waking on a stretcher. None of that. Because things are different now, and we've changed perspectives for the third time in the series. Part 3 has the strangest pacing in the entire series. It's willing to veer off wildly into weird offbeat moments that have little to do with to advance the main plot. The first of these deviations starts things off, beginning as soon as the main credits fade. Harold and Edna's final moments do little more than set the tone of the film, less serious than the previous entry, with stagey death sequences more in line with wax museum torture scenes than the brutal realism that came before. The filmmakers never go for the jugular the way they did before. The intention for this is to be harmless fun, in 3D. Fast forward to yo-yos, paddleballs, and popcorn. Friday the 13th and its first sequel rely heavily on motif-driven narrative tricks to give the story impact. By the time the cameras rolled on Part 3, the series had already become synonymous with a specific sort of suspense and shock sequence, often referred to as stalk and slash scenes. While the gore shots undeniably are a crucial element to those films, they would be completely ineffectual without a strong storyline infrastructure. To prove this point, look no further than the grislier entries in the 1980s slasher wave like Nightmare on a Damaged Brain, which has a cult-devoted following that is microscopic compared to Friday's audience. But in 1982, Paramount really didn't care. They wanted another sequel, not for the story, for the structure, or the impact, but purely for the cash the box office receipts would surely generate. So, rather than focus on the very elements that made the series the defining franchise of the slasher cycle, the suits decided to plunge headfirst into William Castle-esque gimmickry. Enter 3D. Yo-yos, paddleballs, popcorn. It takes the film a remarkably long time to introduce the main cast. The 2009 quasi-remake pulls the same stunt but with a much more dramatic purpose in mind. Here, the narrative simply wanders for a while before settling down with Chris and Rick and the crew. It's notable, too, that our final couple are the least interesting characters in the film. And even bit players like the bikers or Mrs. Sanchez have more depth. Yeah, I did that on purpose. The new partygoers are particularly one-dimensional characters better suited to television sitcoms. Shelley, Chuck, and Chili endear themselves to fans because they're broad parodies of familiar archetypes. A couple of middle-aged hippies straight out of the then-current Cheech and Chong stoner comedies. In a Friday the 13th movie, Shelley seems like an exaggerated extension of the Ned and Ted family tree. Practical Joker is teetering between lovable and obnoxious. Unlike those characters, Shelley's jokes are unrealistically elaborate, if not impossible. How did he pack the scuba gear and the fake hatchet? Excess is everywhere. Perhaps feeling that the killing off of Crazy Ralph in the second film was a mistake, and because that movie's more psychological bent is completely abandoned this time around, we quickly are introduced to Abel, a transparent attempt to capture a little of the original's flavor. I guess there should be some sort of metaphor involved when the film's would-be Greek chorus waves an eyeball at the audience in 3D, but I'll be damned if I can unravel it. But yo-yos, paddleballs, popcorn, and an eye. The major innovation here seems to be the insinuation that Chris was raped by Jason at some previous point. It's exactly here that it becomes clear that the filmmakers fundamentally misunderstood Jason. The idea of the character procreating, that is, creating life rather than taking it, is as misguided as it gets. Jason died, according to his mother, because of sex. The character's entire logic is shattered, or maybe not, since the movie doesn't take the scene to its logical conclusion. Who knows? But if the idea is not followed through, why have it at all? It serves no purpose, not even on an exploitation level, because there's no blood or skin in the scene at all. To fully understand why Friday the 13th Part 3 succeeds wildly as a visual experience, but fails miserably on a storytelling level, we need only look as far as the final girl. Alice was an artist. Ginny was a student of psychology. These films were built around those characters, and they made sense. We see the world through their eyes, and it's consistent, and it's believable. But Chris? What exactly do we even know about her? Except that she avoids intimacy, unlike Alice and Ginny, by the way, and was probably sexually assaulted by a character who detests sex. Nothing. As such, there's nothing to build a film around, and it doesn't feel for a minute like anyone tried. Without a central point of view, the film veers off wildly. Harold and Edna, a trip to the store, the biker's mischief, and every detail seems larger than life and unrealistic. Of course, in the middle of this whirlwind of anti-contextualized threads, Stephen Miner and crew accomplished something far greater than anything in the previous series. This is Ground Zero, the film that cemented Jason as a classic film icon on par with James Bond, James Dean, and Marilyn Monroe. It's The Mask, naturally, and Richard Brooker's fearless performance. It's impossible to imagine this film enduring the way it has without either of those elements. Friday the 13th is undeniably one of the most fun links in the franchise's chain. Story-wise, it's also one of the weakest. Thankfully, the next entry would be filmed in the traditional two-dimensional format, and the series' depth would ironically return. Yo-yos, paddle balls, popcorn.